Jade Thompson had always believed in the power of hard work and dedication. From a young age, her parents had taught her to rise above adversity, to be the best version of herself no matter the challenges life threw at her. Her journey had led her to the corporate world of New York City, where she had landed a high-paying role at one of the top tech companies in the city. It seemed like everything was going according to plan. But reality soon began to paint a different picture. Though her career was on the rise, Jade soon realized that the office, despite its glossy facade, wasn't as welcoming as it seemed. At first, it was the small things, the backhanded compliments about her unique style, the microaggressions disguised as jokes, and the looks that lingered just a bit too long when she walked into the room. But those moments, however subtle, weighed heavily on Jade's heart. She had been the only black woman on her team, and though she'd earned her position through sheer talent, she quickly noticed how her presence was met with a mixture of skepticism and discomfort from her colleagues. Her ideas were dismissed in meetings, not because they were bad, but because they came from her. At first, she chalked it up to office politics, to people being reluctant to embrace change. But as time passed, the insults became more frequent, and the feeling of being an outsider became harder to ignore. Sarah, her supervisor, was particularly cruel. A woman in her mid-40s, Sarah had a way of patronizing Jade that felt like a constant barrage. At first, it was subtle, a look of disapproval whenever Jade made a suggestion. Then it became more overt, insisting Jade wasn't quite ready for senior roles, despite her impeccable performance. The worst came during a critical project presentation. Jade had spent weeks preparing for it, putting together data, drafting a comprehensive proposal, and making sure every detail was in place. She was ready to prove herself. But as soon as she began speaking, Sarah interrupted, dismissing Jade's presentation with a wave of her hand and giving credit to a junior colleague for doing the hard work. The humiliation was palpable. Jade stood there, trying to keep her composure as the room of colleagues, some of whom had witnessed the injustice, remained silent. It felt like the walls were closing in on her. She could see the whispers behind her back, the looks exchanged by her colleagues who were too afraid to speak up. The injustice stung even more because it wasn't just one incident. It was a daily barrage of small attacks that no one else seemed to notice. That night, as Jade sat alone in her apartment, the weight of it all crushed her. She asked herself, why am I the one who has to keep proving myself? Why do I have to work 10 times harder to be seen as worthy, just because of the color of my skin? The following day, Jade did something no one expected. She walked into her boss's office and handed in her resignation. The decision wasn't easy. She had built her entire career around this job. She had put in the long hours, made sacrifices, and poured her heart into every project. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, she knew it was time to leave the toxic environment behind. The price of staying was too high. Her self-worth was slowly being drained away by people who didn't value her. But leaving the company didn't mean leaving behind her dream of success. Jade spent the next few months reflecting on what had happened and, more importantly, on what she truly wanted to do with her life. She sought therapy, connected with mentors, and began to rebuild her confidence. And that's when she realized something profound. The discrimination she had faced was not a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of the broken system she had been forced to navigate. But instead of seeing this as a defeat, Jade used it as fuel for her next chapter. She knew she could not change the past, but she could shape her future. Jade took the leap into entrepreneurship. She started her own consulting business, focusing on helping women of color break through the glass ceiling in corporate spaces. She created a platform for others to share their stories, a community that celebrated the strength of women who had fought, often in silence, against systems designed to keep them down. Her business took off faster than she had ever imagined. Jade became a sought-after consultant for organizations looking to address diversity and inclusion in a meaningful way. She wasn't just offering solutions to companies. She was offering a new way of thinking, one that prioritized empathy, respect, and equality. She helped create work environments where people like her could thrive, where voices that had been silenced were finally heard. And just when Jade thought her journey had come full circle, the unthinkable happened. The very company that had pushed her out of their doors came calling. They were in the middle of a major rebranding, trying to fix their tarnished reputation. Their diversity efforts had fallen flat, and they needed help, real help. The same company that had fired her, that had turned their backs on her, wanted her to come back, not as an employee, but as a consultant. Jade was stunned. She wasn't sure if she should laugh, cry, or simply walk away. But she took the meeting, and when she walked into that conference room, it wasn't the same woman who had walked out years ago. She was different now, stronger, wiser, and in control of her own destiny. The CEO, now a little more humbled, looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. He was no longer the person she had once tried so hard to impress. This time, Jade was the one in charge. She laid out her terms clearly, explaining how their company's internal culture needed a complete overhaul. She demanded respect, change, and accountability. It was clear now. Jade had become a force to be reckoned with, and no one would take her for granted again. She wasn't just a survivor of the system. She had become its disruptor. The company agreed to her terms, and as Jade walked out of that meeting, her phone buzzed with messages of congratulations and support from colleagues who had watched her journey from afar. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every woman of color who had ever been told she wasn't enough. Jade had come back, not as a victim, but as a leader, and the world was finally starting to notice.